Okay, my name is John Barker Brown. I was born in Cornwall Bridge, Connecticut, July 30th, 1921. About the smallest town you'd ever see. I think it was about 300. Two-room school, and worked on a farm, before school and after school, milking cows and so forth. Went skiing in the winter, did a lot of trapping, muskrat, to earn extra money. You only made 35 cents an hour then, in those days. So that's,
Did you go all the way through high school there?
had to walk 2 miles to catch a bus to go to high school, and went to high school in Canaan. And then my dad died, and that left my mom with 5 kids. I got 3 sisters and a brother. He passed away here a couple of years ago. He had Alzheimer's. And so I met this man by the name of Yeoman. He was he was an artist, and I used to stop by and see him when I used to mow lawn for this old Judge Walsh up there on the hill. I used to tow my lawnmower behind my bicycle, because they didn't have a lawnmower. And I used to stop by and see Mr. Yeoman, and he said, "You're sure not going to spend your life mowing lawns and working on a farm, are you?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, why don't you try the Marine Corps?" He'd been in the Marine Corps in World War I. So I waited till I was 17, and I got a application. I sent it in to them, and they sent it back to me, said, "If you are helping support your mother, we can't take you." So Mom wrote a letter and said that I wasn't supporting her, that I was just, working on a farm and so forth. So they gave me an application, and I had to go to New York, and I'd never been to New York before. Had to go to the recruiting station, and there was, I never forget this, there was 40 of us that got to the recruiting station, and we took our physicals, and out of the 40, they only took 12. And a lot of the guys that went up to sign for the Marines, they were drunks, guys off the street. So they sent me home, and then they said, "Well, see, in the Marine Corps, when I went in, there was only 18,000 men in the Marine Corps." And they said, "Well, you go home and we'll tell you when somebody dies or retires or something like that." And then they sent me a notice finally, and I went to New York. And the good thing about being in New York, I used to go to this Episcopal church. It was St. Luke's Church on Hudson Street, and I knew the pastor, and he used to let me stay at the vicarage, when I went to New York. And then he had one of the fellows show me where to go and so forth and so on, that worked in the church. When I signed up, there was 40 men of us went down to the recruiting station, and they took 12. We all went to boot camp together. And then it was funny because there was 6 of us that stayed together, it seemed like for, 6, 7 years, We were always close together and about the same outfits and stuff like that. We really lucked out. They put us on a tourist boat, we went from New York to Savannah, Georgia, and then we got on a train from there to Parris Island, South Carolina, where we did our boot camp training. And it was funny because there were supposed to be 40 men in the platoon, but there wasn't enough men to fill the platoon, so there was only 36. and my number on my platoon there was number 36, I believe. So from boot camp, went to Quantico, Virginia. From Quantico, Virginia, we were on what they call a bull gang, you know, doing dirty work, you know. And then come about December, I believe, in 1940, or 39 or 40, we went on maneuvers in the Caribbean. They always went on maneuvers in the wintertime. And when maneuvers were over, they told us that they were going to replace some people down in St. Thomas and Virgin Islands. They used to have an air station there. They had amphibious planes, you know. They used to go out to, in those days, just well, anyway, they used to haul bauxite, which they make aluminum out of, and the Germans, even before the war, they were bombing or, you know, torpedoing ships, you know. So it was our job to send the planes out there to try to rescue the guys, you know. And we had a crash boat that we used to go out there and try to get the guys that got torpedoed, you know. So I lucked out because they were looking for a guy that was pretty sharp, and they picked me as a colonel chauffeur, you know. That was a pretty good job. All I had to do is bring the colonel to the base in the morning and go back and pick his wife up, and she'd go shopping, you know, in all those shops down there in the Danish place, and take care of his dog, take him to the vet, and so forth and so on. And then that job lasted quite a long while. This old fella, the colonel, his name was Tex Rogers. He came from Texas, and he loved polo. And if you wanted to be in tight with the old man, you had to buy a horse and get on the polo team, you know. So when I was a kid, I could ride pretty good. So I bought a horse from St. Croix. That was another little island down there, for $35. And of course, I got picked for the colonel's on his team, you know. It was a lot of fun because half of those guys, they'd never ridden a horse before, you know. And imagine guys not riding horses and, you know, trying to play polo. It was pretty rough. The sailors would come ashore, and the Marines, you know, they had the base. They had a barracks up there, and we'd always have a smoker. You know what a smoker is?
Explain a smoker for kids.
Well, it'll get up there and do a little fisticuff, you know. And the guys said, "Brown, you're in pretty good shape. Why don't you enter that smoker?" Well, I entered it. The first thing, the guy, that sailor, hit me right in the nose and busted my nose. I mean, I said, "No more smokers for me." But I had a motorcycle down there that I was able to buy from a fellow who was going back to the States. I had a speedboat, you know. That was pretty cool. And we had a boat we used to go, St. John. They would let the guys, it was 4 duty sections, you know. There was 1 on duty and then 3 off, you know. And they'd let you have 2 or 3 days off, and we had this boat that the guys all chipped in and bought. And we used to go out to St. John, you know, drink a little beer and fish, you know. It was pretty cool. And then the war started.
Do you remember exactly December 7th, 1941? How did you get the news?
Yeah, I was, where was I? I believe I was in Quantico, Virginia, just before, you know, when the war started. Because we were down in St. Thomas a couple of years, and then when the war started, they shipped us back to the States, you know. And yeah, I was in Quantico, Virginia. When I came and trained as a gunner back in Swansboro, North Carolina. And we used to go to the USO. A few girls were there, we danced, and that's where I met my wife, Got married in 41. Went to South Carolina. This pilot loaned me his car so we could go down there and get married, And then a month later, I went overseas again, Of course, I left the wife pregnant, She stayed with her folks, and her dad used to work at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. He worked on boilers and stuff like that. From Quantico, Virginia, we went to the West Coast, and they put us on board ship. And of course, Pearl Harbor had already been bombed, so we went to Midway. You've heard of Midway Island, and we had a squadron of dive bombers, and they were looking for rear gunners for dive bombers. So they said, "Brown, you'd probably be a good one." So I got on with this guy's name, Lieutenant Gusty, and he used to. We never bombed anybody or anything. It was just, protect the island. And when the Japs, had been there and made a mess of the whole thing, And he would never remember to switch his gas tanks on his plane. And we ditched about 5 or 6 times, and I saw the colonel, and I said, this is not for me. Luckily, we didn't get drowned,
With the pilot you were with when you were a rear gunner, what was it like to ditch? What did you go through when you came down? Explain that to people.
Well, nowadays, you got ejection seats, But in the old days, I mean, like when you're a rear gunner, you're facing towards the back, to protect the tail end, And it's pretty hairy, because unless the pilot can land that plane and not nose it in, you're gonna die, You're gonna drown. But we were pretty lucky. We got out of there about 5 times. I think it was about 5 times we ditched the plane. I'll tell you, that was the end of that gunner. I told the colonel, I said, no, so he wasn't too sharp a pilot anyway. So they just, pushed him through flight school as fast as they could, because they needed pilots. And in those days, we had what they call enlisted pilots, Nowadays, everybody's officer, that flies. But we had buck sergeants that would fly, that went through flight school, and that was unusual, in those days for something like that to happen.
Were they just as short of pilots if they just kept?
Well, the Marine Corps kind of got the leftovers, because they weren't too big an Air Force anyway. You know what I mean? They had fighter planes and dive bombers, and the Navy always got the better, better deal on the whole thing, So.
When you ditched, how long were you in the water?
Well, in those days, that you didn't have too many. You had just a Mae West, what they call a Mae West, like a life jacket, That's all you had, and lucky if. Most times we were really fortunate because we would be out, on a patrol or something, and he'd be coming back, and he'd be pretty close to the ship, and that way they could put a lifeboat over, and save us. But that was pretty hairy.
Were you in any real combat during?
No, I wasn't. Being in aviation like that, you don't see. No, like a line company man, or that out there with a rifle. No, I didn't. So I said, how about put me to work on the carrier, working on airplanes, because I was pretty handy with my hands and stuff. And I got assigned a crew working on planes.
What was life like on an aircraft carrier? It was a big ship at that time, but it still had to be
Oh.
awfully cramped with all the.
Oh, it's cramped. You sleep in triple decker bunks, you know. That's it. And if you were lucky, you got hot water when you went to the shower, you know. Uh, I remember when I we went someplace. I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was on a troop transport. You know, it was an old Dutch freighter, and they didn't have what you call per se toilets. You know, they had a trench down running alongside the ship with water in it, and that's where you did your duty. You know, and there would always be somebody there that was a smart aleck, and he'd get a big bunch of paper, you know, and there's a whole bunch of guys sitting on the trough going doing their duty, and light it, you know, and send it down there. There's always some joker someplace. Yeah, the food was pretty good. You had to eat standing up, you know, no place to sit down. But
We've talked to a lot of guys that were Navy guys that were really happy with the fact that they were on a ship as opposed to being, one of the foot soldiers or one of the Marines out there in the islands, really kind of by themselves. Did you have that kind of feeling when you were on board a ship?
Marines and sailors, and always stationed a Marine squadron on board carrier, you know, with the Navy, you know, like maybe the Navy would have torpedo bombers, and the Marines would have a squadron of fighters or something like that, or dive bombers, you know, a two-seater, you know, not like B-24 or nothing like that. No, there was we always got along good. I'll never forget this one thing. On Midway, they had what they call goonie birds. You know, the ones that go, you know, they look funny, you know, black and white bird. And we lived in Quonset huts, and the darn birds, they were getting under the huts, you know, and start making that doggone noise all night long, you know. And then we used to have to chase them off the runway, because, heck, those birds were about that tall, you know, they were big. And if one of the planes hit the darn thing, it would have wrecked it, you know, because those planes in those days, they wasn't too cool. But from there, let's see, went to the Marshall Islands we was on board carrier, and then we went back to Pearl Harbor. We got a load of planes. We were going to take them to the Philippines, and we ran into a typhoon, you know, I mean, and we lost all the planes that were on the deck. So we had to come back to Pearl Harbor again. Never did get to the Philippines. I think it was a Ranger. I'm not sure. I can't remember that much.
Tell us about that typhoon. You lost all the planes?
Well, I'll tell you, you've never been in anything unless you've been in, you know, and a carrier's a big vessel, you know. Of course, they're bigger than they are now. But I mean, those guys were so sick. I mean, you know, they were just puking all over the place. It was. We thought the plane or the ship was going to tip over. You know, it was awful. It just wiped all the planes off. It just, you know, you had them tied down with cables and stuff like that, and it just ripped them right off the deck. It was terrible.
Did you lose any men off the ship?
Yeah, there's guys that were standing watch on deck. You know. Yeah, we lost a few men. So we went back and we stayed at Pearl Harbor for a while. They had to bring some more planes from the States to Pearl Harbor, and then we finally got the dive bombers, and they had torpedoes, TBFs, you know, and dropped those off. And then we came back to the States and went to San Diego. And let's see, from San Diego, I went to Cherry Point, North Carolina. Cherry Point was a Marine Corps air station. Quantico had a small air station, but it was, I had the motor transport in Quantico for the time I was there. That picture there, it shows me there in Quantico. They were giving out some kind of safe driving award or something. And what we had a lot of staff cars because people was going back and, Washington D.C. just 300 miles up the road. And we had small vehicles and stuff like that, So that's what I did. I took care of those vehicles until I went to Korea. The war was kind of going down, and it was I made sergeant when I was down St. Thomas, and then let's see, I made master sergeant real in about 5 years, which was kind of unheard of in those days because the Marine Corps was cutting back on people, and they said, "Well, Brown, there's not much working on airplanes anymore. Says, how would you like to be on a crash crew?" And that was that we had boom trucks, and we had these swamp buggies, with the props on the back. And when the planes would go down, we'd go out and try to rescue the pilot, and get the plane back up. But 9 times out of 10, you never could save the plane. Might save the pilot. But Cherry Point was on the inland waterway. There's a lot of water in there, right on the Atlantic Ocean. And so I stayed with the crash crew for a long time. And then my wife's dad died. I went to his funeral, and I came back, and then I had more orders for Korea. And they gave me a truck company in Korea, and I had all the misfits, all the guys that nobody else wanted, like the colored guys that but I always treated them pretty good, And we had old International 6x6s, to haul. We used to have to haul diesel fuel. And the outfit I was with was a radar outfit up near the 38th parallel. And when the planes would come over, the radar would take over and send them where they wanted to drop the bombs, And it was my job to see if they had fuel and keep the generators running and stuff like that.
You said you had a bunch of misfits in Korea. How was it to deal with a unit like that?
Well, when you're like a radar, when you're sitting behind a radar screen and you're directing planes, you got to be pretty sharp, And they would just assign a bunch of people, that didn't fit into that way, and that's what I would get as far as my motor transport crew, And you'd send them on a run, and you'd figure, well, are they going to get back? Are they going to get locked up or what? Get drunk, and stuff like that. But I always looked out for my men, and so they respected me for that, and they gave me an extra, So when you treat a person decent, you get it back, You get paid back. Korea was okay. I was lucky. I've been lucky, though, because I never actually was in any combat like you see in the movies and all that stuff, So Lord was good for me. He brought me home. Came back to the States from Korea. Went to a couple R&Rs in Japan, Kyoto and a couple places like that. Real nice.
It sounds like in those days people didn't travel to other parts of the country. It had to be an interesting opportunity to travel to different places.
Well, yeah, you don't have much choice, you just go where they send you. But
you hadn't been outside of Connecticut that much until you'd left for the Marines, had you?
When I was in Quantico, I used to go back and see my mom. My mom died in '92. And of course my dad died. I can't remember when he died, but he was only 40-some years old when he died. But like I say, I had 3 sisters and 1 brother. And I went back to Connecticut a few times. And then when I came back from World War II, I took the wife home, you know, to meet my mom, and that's when I bought my first car after World War II, an old 39 Ford. This was I bought it for about $200, I guess. Had to put a new motor in it and stuff like that. I kept that car a long time. That's a good car. I think I went back. Yeah, I went back to Cherry Point, and then they transferred me to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, for a short tour of duty I had before my time was up when I could retire. They assigned me to a artillery battalion, and we used to go up to 29 Palms in California on maneuvers, you know, and we'd have to haul all the guns up there and everything. They always used to give, when you retired, they always used to give you a parade, you know. But you know, like we used to call the guys in the line, like the guys that were artillery or whatever. What do we call them? Well, some name we had for them. But they didn't like people that had came from aviation to be transferred down there to the line company, you know. So I was one of the only ones that they didn't give a parade to, and it kind of ticked me off, you know. The first sergeant gave me my walking papers, my discharge, you know. So I didn't get it. I didn't get a parade. Kind of hurt me. And 'cause I was always a good Marine. I always looked after my men, you know. I was coming back from the base. We used to have to, I lived in Dana Point, and we went to Camp Pendleton. Okay. And the road we went on, it was always fogged over real bad, you know, and they called it Slaughter Alley. Well, in the meantime, they redid the road and where it was more safe, you know, to be on. Well, I got discharged from the Marine Corps, and I had this old Hudson, and I got to San Clemente. That was a town about 20 miles away from where I lived in Dana Point, and I looked down the dashboard, and it started heating up on me, you know, and I figured, well, you got to get me home. So I figured, well, can't hurt the car no more than what it is, you know, an old Hudson. They look like a bathtub, you know. Good old car, though. And so I drove that home, and there was a filling station down below on the foot of the hill on the Coast Highway. And I went over there and saw this fella that I used to do business with, and I said, my car just gave up the ghost. I said, you want to buy a Hudson? He said, yeah, I'll buy it from you. Well, just luckily, the wife had an old Mercury she bought, and so we had transportation, you know. So, seeing as I had something to do with trucks, I knew this fellow that worked at this rock plant, you know, aggregate plant, and I said, do you know of any jobs around? And he says, yeah, come out to Livingston Graham. They're doing pretty good because they're putting in a new freeway, you know. And so I went out there, and a week later I had a job. I was out of work for a week when I got out of the Marine Corps. I stayed we used to drive what they call Euclids, you know, big bottom dumps, double unit, you know. It was just go down to the pit and load up, come up and dump your load in the trap, you know, where it ran through the plant, you know, make all kinds of aggregate and sand and stuff like that. I kept that job from 10 or 15 years, I guess, and used to work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And then finally, I got pretty well burned out on that, you know, and I always wanted to drive a semi cross country. So I had a little money saved up, so I bought a tractor, and I drove from San Juan to Milwaukee, back and forth, hauling parts for rock crushers, and stuff like that. And then my daughter, she I was in '84 or '85. She was living in Fallbrook, and she moved. No, she married Charlie McKay that has Church Ranch out here, and then she said, well, I had sold my truck and I was just living. I had one son that was going to college in Fresno, so he stayed at home, and we had a little house there. And then she called us one day and said, Dad and Mom said, how'd you like to move to Colorado? I'd never given it a thought, and never been to Colorado. Flew the wife up, and my daughter flew down. We loaded the truck up. I hitched my car up behind the truck, and we came to Colorado, and I lived in Boulder for a while. And the wife was pretty sick. She had emphysema and all kinds of things. She in the hospital all the time. And then in May '95, they found that she had cancer of the esophagus. And Sadie's husband, Charlie, had this little house that they used to have for the hired man, and he fixed that up for the wife, so she lived on a ranch, in that little house. And I used to take care of the wife, and Sadie would come over because she was just a little ways away from Mom. And then my son Joel, he came home from surveying for the oil companies, and he said, Dad, you look like you're about dead. So I used to take care of the wife night and day, and it's pretty hard, when a woman's dying, or a man, whatever it is. And so he said, we'll take turns. You take the night and I'll take the day, or whatever. So he stayed home from the job, and he helped me take care of the wife. So I'll never forget the day. It was 3:15 in the afternoon. She looked over at me and smiled, and she was gone. She knew where she was going. The Lord took her home. We buried her up in Green Mountain Cemetery in Boulder, and got my name on one side and hers on the other, I'm going to be cremated when I die. I already made my urn. I got my urn made already. I gave it to my son. He'll be the one that'll take care of me. So I do woodwork now. I make Adirondack chairs, jewelry boxes, wind chimes, model covered wagons, stagecoaches, windmills, you name it. Part of it in my house, and then Charlie, my son-in-law, he lets me have bottom of the barn over there, There's a big barn, and there's some stalls, where the cows used to be. He lets me have a shop over there down in the basement, So as far as my woodworking, I've made, I think what I like to do, make jewelry boxes and give them away to ladies, That makes them so happy, Windmills, I got 7 windmills sitting in my apartment now. I got a stagecoach and a covered wagon. I can't find anybody to sew the top for me. I'll have to do it by hand, I guess. And the first covered wagon I made for my daughter. She's got it sitting on remember these old-timey ice boxes, you put a piece of ice in the top? She's got it sitting on top there. She's had that since, that was one of the first ones I made. I made that in 1986. Yeah, I even made myself a bobsled. Let me tell you about this bobsled. I had this wood book, and you know what a bobsled looks like? So I saw the plans for this bobsled in this doggone wood book, the wood magazine I used to subscribe to. And I thought, I'm gonna make myself one of those. So Charlie gave me some oak, it's oak about an inch thick. Made the four runners, two for the front, two for the back. Nice big board for where you sit, and then I got finished with the bobsled, and I thought to myself, what in the heck am I going to do with a bobsled? So Clint, his dad lives in Pennsylvania. He's a boot man too. So I said, Clint, what am I going to do with this bobsled? He said, I know just a place for it. My dad would just love it. Well, Clint knew this trucker that hauls furniture back from Colorado to Pennsylvania. And all we had to do was buy the trucker a tank of diesel for his rig, and he hauled the doggone bobsled back to Pennsylvania. Now I made another one. I made another bobsled. Just just for the heck of it. I don't know. I don't know what I'll do with this bobsled. It's a pretty nice one.
Explain your bootmaker friend, Clint.
Oh, Clint. Well, let's see. He's about 40 years old. He's married, and he used to live out by Stanley Lake out there. And then he got a wild hair, and he sold his house, and he moved up off I-25 up there someplace. Anyway, his dad is a bootmaker too, so Clint does that boot working too. And he used to have a little shop down by Siltahora Ford there, where that Japanese got that little market there. And then this place opened up over here, and so he rented that. And he bummed around the country doing different things until he came out here and started, he went in with his boot shop over there with this fella of his, and then he thought, well, hell, might as well get my own, so he saved up a little money and started up his own boot shop. And see, they got one little boy. He's 5 or 6 years old now, I guess. He looks just like his dad. I call Clint every morning because I'm retired anyway, or retarded, like they say. And I said, Clint, you got any mail today? I take his mail down to the post office and mail for him because he's by there himself. He can't get out, And he don't want to close the shop up, because there's people come in there, they want to get taken care of, But I call Clint my adopted son. He's real. You can tell a girl or a boy or a man by the parents that raised him. And Clint he just got manners, par excellence. And you can tell the way you were raised up by the way you like when I go to the post office or see somebody with a package or something, I always wait and open the door for them, and they say, gosh, you're such a gentleman. I said, well, that's what my mom told me to be, that's the way she raised me.
Did you ever see any of the guys you were in the Marine Corps with after the war?
I used to write to a couple of them. I never did see them. We had people from New York, Georgia. There was another fellow from Connecticut, Mike Balco. I don't know if he's living yet. And I get this Marine Corps news, and in the back it has taps, and I always look through there to see if I can remember their names, who's passed away, I never did go to, like they have reunions, you know, for different squadrons and units, you know, and stuff like that, but I never did go. We had 6 kids, so I was I was working most all the time, you know. So I got at 4. Let's see, two was born in Cherry Point. No, one was born in Camp Lejeune, 2 in Cherry Point, North Carolina. My daughter was born in Quantico, Virginia. And then my last, we had the first 4, and then we didn't have any kids for about 6 or 7 years, you know. Then 2 more popped out, and they were both born premature. And my youngest son, he's 6'4". I don't know how he ever grew up like that, because I could hold him in the crook of my arm. He was so small when he was a baby. And he lives over on the ranch too, with next to my daughter in a trailer. And then I got a son in Boulder. I got a son that's a registrar in a college in Frisco. Yeah, he just got a new job, Frisco. I got a boy in Maui. He's a baker in a hotel there. And then I got a son that works or runs the water district up there in Yucca Valley, up near Palm Springs, California. He's almost old enough to retire. God, makes you old, you know.
What do you think of the events that have happened since September 11th, how the country's reacted? Can you compare it to World War II?
Well, it's a different kind of war altogether, you know. Like in World War II, they would, you know, the Marines or the Navy, they would bomb an island, and then the Marines would have to, you know, go ashore and take the island. And it's I can see where that now Vietnam, I didn't see that so much, you know. I just didn't I didn't go for that so much. And I don't know, it's they're just fortunate they haven't lost more men than they have, you know. Yeah.